Billy, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you, brother?
I'm good, brother. It's a lovely, wet, cold 10 a.m. here in Aotearoa, New Zealand on Sunday, and I'm talking to my fellow brother in arms.
Oh, mate, I've got a huge love for New Zealand, I have to tell you. My wife comes from New Zealand and we spent a lot of time over there. And last time I was over, or a couple of years ago, I was like, I came home to my wife, Nick, and I said, I think I want to live in New Zealand down the track. When the kids finish high school, I think we'll set ourselves up probably around Gisborne or something like
Oh
that,
yeah.
where there's good fishing, good hunting, good waves, good people, and just a wonderful way of life in New Zealand. And that's what I'd love to explore with you today, is what is happening in New Zealand and why is the way of life being challenged at the moment? And I know that you are putting your hand up or putting your head up uh,
Yeah.
to facilitate change. So let's start with that, and
Okay.
let's a little bit of your background first and why you love New Zealand.
Yeah, that's a deep and broad and wide question. But I mean, initially in Aotearoa here in New Zealand, we grow up in a society that's not without its problems and issues. We have the historical issues of Indigenous grievance as Māori. We have some of the injustices there that are now well documented and accepted. But putting that aside, we really do grow up shoulder to shoulder and back to back, here in New Zealand, and it's not as distinct. Cultures aren't as distantiated from each other in some of the countries as I've seen. Here we're sort of a bit of a melting pot. Like myself, my dad is Māori. My mum comes from a French and Irish background, and so I'm a bit of a fruit salad myself, as we call us. And but grew up with all the Pacific Island family. Grew up with kids from all over the world. So it's a great melting pot. And the thing I love about New Zealand is that we used to be a very, very, very accepting country, and I think there's a core there that still is, and that's a great way to grow up. Mix that with the freedom of the outdoors, which we share with our Aussie family, of course. Beach, sun, surf, but our bush we can go hunting, and we don't have snakes, which I love. I hate snakes, and the beauty and the freedom of being able to grow your own food and all those things that we really do take for granted, I guess. The beautiful things that make up our Kiwiana experience, as we call it. And there's also something else called the Kiwi Fair Shake, which is giving everybody a fair deal. That's how I was raised, and I was raised where if you shake your hand on a deal, it's done. It doesn't matter about the paperwork, it's done. And so those very basic principles of writing good and coming from a mixed cultural background like I do kind of evens me out to be able to appreciate a lot of good things and people as well.
Mate, well said. And I have to say, over the years, I've had so many good friends from New Zealand. The early days for me, when I used to run restaurants, I used to have a lot of chefs that would come from New Zealand. And I have to tell you one thing, what you just said then sums it up perfectly. A handshake is the way, it's, and the work ethic that I found from my New Zealand cousins was the Aussies could learn a thing or two, and I'm not here to bag out any culture or anything like that. But I tell you what, the Kiwis that came through my restaurants, they were some of the hardest working, most loyal, beautiful human beings that I had ever come across.
That's wonderful.
At Maori, we had the fruit salads, as you called it. I don't know whether I'm allowed to call it that.
No, but, you're right, mate. You're right.
And the melting pot. And I created some beautiful friendships during that time. And it always made me think there were some amazing family values and just morals that were ingrained in the Kiwis that, really made me take notice. It's like, wow, there's something going on in New Zealand that is powerful. And I'd love to explore that with you a little bit,
Sure.
A little bit further. What was it like for you to grow up with Maori heritage? And apologize, and I'd love for you to be able to actually pronounce Maori for me, because I always get in trouble for saying it wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right, mate. And you look, the thing about, the problem with this whole gender and cultural and identity, identity politics, is that really, if you're in an engagement with someone and they're making an honest attempt at communicating with you, you should be able to without being berated, make a mistake. I mean, I've met people with foreign cultures, and I'm pretty good with languages, but I always get extremely embarrassed with people when I muck their Polish name or Russian name up, and everyone's always very forgiving of me. So I reckon that we always need to be like that with each other. So growing up for me, with a Māori dad and a European mum. So Māori is the Māori. You can say Māori, you can say Māori, you can say Maori, But I typically, when I'm serious, I say Māori. So that's the r. That's why we speak Italian and Spanish so well, because we have the r in our language. So Māori. But growing up, I grew up with my mum. So my father's a very famous Māori guitar legend here in New Zealand. In fact, I was in Melbourne recently before the COVID, and I did a great pile of shows across Melbourne. In fact, I was meant to headline the St Kilda Blues Festival that was cancelled, unfortunately, in March. I was meant to be the headline artist for that. But so I never saw my dad much when I grew up, and I grew up with mum. And my mother's family were well off, but we weren't. So we grew up in what's called a state house here, or what's called social housing now, in quite a poor suburb of South Auckland. It was beautiful in those when we first moved there. It was tomato glass houses. It was horses and fields and all that. But within a few years, we were all squashed into this social housing precinct. So I grew up in a state house with my beautiful mum and a twin sister. And very happy life, but not a lot. We always ate well. I can't ever remember being hungry. Always had enough of everything, but not lots of everything. We had a push-start car, which was the joke at school, because we hated when Mum used to try and come and pick us up from school. We'd rather walk home because we were embarrassed of our car. And it was a push-start car, because if it stopped, you had to push it to get the start again. And but grew up very happy, very much a non-religious background there with my whānau, my family, and just grew up with a great appreciation of what it's like to be at the bottom, I guess, with other kids and that were in social houses as well, and you just learn to take people for who they are, not what they are and what they've got. Because when I grew up, no one had a lot of anything. I mean, when I was about 12, I got my BMX, and that was like, wow, that was like that was the equivalent of getting Tom Selleck's Ferrari, and off Magnum PI, and it was even red. So it was, it's a big deal like that. And then we all got our bikes at the same time, all the neighbours' kids. So and yet I guess in more well-off families, they would have had their BMX a lot sooner than us, but grew up with a good appreciation of things, to really value what you earn. I started my first working experience when I was about 10, working in a lunch bar. By the time I was 12, I was working in another lunch bar. Then I got to high school. I was doing a paper round in my first year of high school, and did that until I graduated into working in a fish and chip shop. And then that was all cool. Did that for a good period of time, and then I went to work in a petrol station, which I worked every hour I could, because I was saving up for my own car, because I wasn't in a situation where I had someone like a dad or someone saying, "Here you go, mate. Here's your money. Go and buy a car." So I knew that I had to do it myself. So from there, I went and got a night job, working late hours, a night shift at the Johnson & Johnson canteen, which was in Manukau City, and I used to work night shift there. So that would be sort of after high school, around about, I guess, 6 o'clock to about midnight each night, and that paid me really well. So pretty soon I bought my own car, and from there on in, I became a guitar player and toured with my dad, and became a rock and rolling hippie child.
You've also served in the military, I believe, as well, and the corporate space.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's really funny. You'll never guess what. I just got an email from a guy. I don't know how he got my email, saying, and this is what I'm learning about trolls, and I'm learning about people who are out to discredit you, because this guy was saying, "Hey, mate," and it was so funny too, because he's obviously a European Pākehā guy. He said to me, "Kia ora, Billy, kei te pihia koe," which is, "G'day, mate, how are you?" In Aussie language. And then he said, "Hey, just be careful about talking about your military background and that, and just make sure, New Zealand's too small a place." So I sent him this email back, and I'll just read it to you, because you just, these guys, I normally ignore them, but this is something I take really, really seriously, because nobody joins the military lightly, and it's something that you become very proud of. I'm very proud of our New Zealand Defence Force people, and here he goes. This is what he says. He says to me, and it's good that I've got it here. Oh, here we go. This is how I won't mention his name, but I'll read the email to you. He goes like this: "Tēnā koe, Billy, kei te pihia koe. Just a bit of feedback. Be careful about misrepresenting your military background. Aotearoa is too small for that kind of lark." So this is what I'll reply. So that really smoked my nostrils, made my nostrils flare. And I said, and I replied to him, and I didn't even address him. I said to him, "Excuse me, how have I misrepresented my military background? I served in the New Zealand Defence Force and the New Zealand Army, NZLR for 90 months as a regular force soldier. From there, I completed all of the introductory military intelligence core courses, brackets, which are 3, in Waitangi at the military intelligence school. Served a tour of duty with the military police in Trentham, and served in the 3 Auckland Regiment Support Company. So before you throw anything at me, check your own integrity and facts. Thank you very much." So nice and short, and so saying, that's I've realised now what a great target people are when they front something and stand face forward in front of a big movement like me. And it's really amazing, like my corporate background as well. So again, I left school very young at 15 without a qualification, and started playing guitar. But what I did at the age of 20, I was pretty good at playing guitar by then, and I was playing for bands and all that. But I woke up one morning and thought to myself, I do not want to be one of those poor, struggling musicians, and I wasn't going to settle for not owning my own home and not having a decent car, because of my background, of course, having a push-start car when I was a kid. And so I went and approached Lion Breweries in Auckland, and I said to them, I got to admit, I did hustle and con myself a meeting with the very, very top brand manager at Lion Breweries. Walked in, I said to him, "Hi, mate." I said, "I'm Billy TK Jr., Billy Te Kahika, and I'm the hottest young guitar player in New Zealand. I'm on my way to Texas to get myself a record contract. I'm going to get one. And every time I play, I sell lots of Lion Red, Steinlager, and whatnot. And if I was you, I'd give me $20,000. And this guy, I'll never forget it. He was a neat young guy. He would have been in his mid-30s. I was 21. He just about fell off his seat and laughed at this guy. He really did. I had my little half-page proposal that was naively written up. And he laughed, this guy, and he said, "Look, mate, I'm not going to give you 20 grand. I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to book you in all the Lion Breweries hotels. I'll do all your posters. I'll give you as much beer as you can drink. You come back and tell me what you gave me for my money in 3 months." So 3 months later, I go back in, and that turned into 7.5 years working with Lion Breweries. They sponsored all my tours. They paid me big money. They made me a Steinlager rep in the Pacific. They taught me about consumer marketing and trade marketing from the bottom up. And I was responsible for some very, very big campaigns. And from there, that opened up the entire corporate life to me, where I found myself working for some of our largest snack foods company as a guitar player and as a manager, believe it or not. And pretty soon I was a national key account manager, national manager at one of our largest snack foods companies here in New Zealand. And really that's that that experience, I guess, of having to find the answers to be able to take that next step up the ladder, how to get ahead, because when you're not taught it in, I guess, in schools, and I don't think schools today teach kids actually how to do that. You have to figure it out yourself, otherwise you're trapped. And I had to do that, and so I did. And so that led into doing major events for these sponsors, which turned me into a company which specialised in doing international events in Fiji, the Cook Islands, Samoa, working in Tahiti, and then becoming an advisor to governments in that space around event tourism and revenues, and then working with various international high commissions, including the Australian Foreign Affairs, DFAC, and our own New Zealand High Commission, and then also the US State Department. I did an event with them, a big one in Fiji. So again, just that self-made, self-direction and finding, and to work out how to get myself ahead and pay for all my children.
Yeah, and I'd love for you to talk about that, because you are a father and also a grandfather.
I am.
And I want to talk to you about and get to understand you as a father, grandfather, and the values that you hold, the values that you were taught, or your belief systems from a very young age growing up, and how that has impacted you as a father and as a grandfather, and how have you changed as a person over that time, if you have?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think number one is that I basically grew up without a father, so I had my male role models and influences. Well, number one was my mother's father, my papa, my grandfather, who really, he was the guy that drilled into me, is that if you shake the hand on a deal, it's done. It doesn't matter if you end up losing the shirt off your back, you fulfill that. And he taught me about being fair and doing the right thing all the way through as a little boy, right up to the day he died, really, when I was 17. And I guess that sort of grounding, and my uncles around me as well were a part of that influence. I guess that sort of grounding is always a very good foundation to fall back on. And it stayed with me all my life, that type of thing. But I guess in terms of being a father, it was definitely a learning on the job scenario. I became a young father at 20, just I think before my 21st, and had a beautiful girl who's now 27. Oh my word! and who's given me my beautiful two granddaughters who are 3 and 8, and then that was all good. So for me, I've always loved kids, and even as a young guy, being a dad and learning on the job was good. I mean, I love this little one. I'll never forget it, and it was just awesome. And then number 2 came along, and that was awesome. And then number 3 came along, that was great. And again, learning on the job, and then what happened as life happens, that marriage ended, thankfully, to my mostly to my rock and roll career that I had at the time. Without giving you the gory details, I'm sure you can imagine what that means. And so I was very, very blessed to 17 and a half years ago to meet my who was then my girlfriend, who's become my wife, who I've been with a lot longer than anyone in my life, and she's my best friend and my wife, and my companion in facing life's challenges. But certainly in terms of growing up, I grew up with a very interesting spiritual sort of background. I had a mum that likes to claim she's a Buddhist, because she loves the Dalai Lama and has lots of little Buddhas sitting around the home. And my father is used to be a Hare Krishna back in the day, or a Divine Light disciple, which is all that sort of Eastern sort of Hinduistic spiritualism. And it's very much anchored in the New Age stuff. And I grew up as a teenager, and just ensconced in that world, the whole 9 yards, crystals, healings, all that. So the whole plethora of understanding, from Hinduistic, Hindu faith type religions like Buddhism, Krishnaism, and then the different isms that come off that. I read the Bhagavad Gita when I was 17, which is the Krishna verses, and really went through a lot without knowing at the time, I learned a lot about Greek philosophy, Aristotle thinking, all that sort of stuff. And all of it is about how enlightened I am and how divine I'm going to be and all that. And so Jesus was never a part of that at all. But when I got to about 19, I had my first encounter with the Lord, and I really didn't want it, didn't ask for it, because Jesus all throughout my household was just one of the many masters, just another spiritual teacher. Nothing special about this guy. He's the same as Muhammad, you name it, any of the spiritual masters, Maitreya, Buddha, Gautama, you name it, he was just one of them. But something was very, very different and very profound about that, because the experience I had, I'd never experienced before in any of the faith systems ever. But what happened with that, I'm a bit of an intellectually curious person, and I thought, okay, I didn't want to be one of these Christians that couldn't answer for his faith and didn't have an intellectual, intelligent basis for it, because most of the Christians I'd known at that time I felt, never provided me with any credibility around why Jesus is the Son of God and who is God of the Bible. So I put myself through some intense study in that. Then I left it. I went into the army and did my stints in the army and with serving the community in various roles. But after that, and especially after my first marriage ended, I really started looking again. But when I was much older now, I really got stuck in and did serious study of the prophetic books of the Bible, which are Daniel and Revelation. And what blew the intellectual part of me is that I was able to work out, because the Bible is self-interpreting, there doesn't need to be 3,000 interpretations. The Bible was never designed for that. It was meant to self-interpret so that everyone arrives at the same conclusion. But there's a timeline from A to Z. All these things are going to happen in it. I studied them, and through history, encyclopedia, through deep research, because of the skills I'd learned in the military, I was able to tick everything off. So in this timeline from here to here, everything verbatim has happened, and the last little bit is left in time there. And so what tells me, if this Bible that I'm reading says everything is going to happen up until this period or this point, and it's happened, it tells me that the last little bit is very much likely to happen. And that got me into geopolitical studies, because I really wanted to understand how this would roll out. So I did, and I started examining everything from 9/11, the geopolitical situation of the early 90s with the Earth Rio Summit, to understand how the sustainable discussion arrived, and how Agenda 21 was developed, and how those very, very same agendas would end up being a mechanism to destroy freedoms and happiness across the planet. And that's basically how I ended up to where I am today.
And now you've created a political party or a movement. Explain to me what's transpired recently for you. Before we hopped onto this chat, you were telling me just over the last few weeks how many people have started supporting you. And so tell us about the catalyst for that, which you just alluded to or just pointed out.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Did you ever think you would be in this position, that you would be this person? Because I know for myself, and at the moment with what's going on in the world, I potentially am one of the few people with profile in this country anyway, sharing what I would call some truths. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And then I was told, you got to speak to Billy. You got to speak to Billy. Billy's doing some amazing things in New Zealand, or is getting a large following. So why you? Why now? What's your intention?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Well, number one, no one is more surprised than me. Truly. It's turned my life upside down, and my poor wife is hanging on there with me, bless her soul. In fact, I think about 6 weeks today. In fact, it was a Sunday afternoon. We were locked in the COVID-19 scamdemic lockdown, and I'm sitting here thinking, look, I've known about that this was coming for a long time, and because of the lockdown, rather than just being idle, I thought I'd start applying my research and study skills into finding out what's really happening with this thing, because at its very first announcement that this crisis was coming upon us, I was very concerned that it may have been a bio weapon, which it has turned out to be. But I was concerned that it was going to be a mass super virus release as a bio weapon, and that really concerned me. So I was all for the lockdown at first, so that we could have time to unpack what was actually happening to us and what the threat was. So typical threat assessment stuff. But after about a week or two, it started to smell like a fish to me. So I really got stuck into looking at the science based on it. And there's a thing that I like to call looking at the chain of evidences and the chain of actors and players when you start looking at something like this and establishing who the players are, who are the connections. You'll see on all those spy movies, when they show the intelligence operations room, they've always got the big whiteboard up, and you'll see photos of John, Frank, Henry, Jane, Susan, and all that, and all these people, and they'll have string, that's pinned to that, and everyone's connected like that. So it's kind of like I started that process, and believe me, that really does happen in real life when you're doing threat assessments and intelligence evaluation. You really do that. That's how it's
like a web.
It's done. It is a
spider web.
That's exactly it, and connecting it all together. So what I did is that I started. The first thing I did, I wanted to understand who Dr. Anthony Fauci was, who was Trump's advisor, because he just didn't look right to me from day one. He really didn't. He just something about him didn't look right to me. Wanted to understand what his background looked like. So I connected him immediately to Bill Gates. So he sits on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Executive Board. So he's smack in the middle of that organization, which is a very, very, very suspicious and shady organization that's been fingered for some very, very horrible crimes, especially in Africa. And from there, I wanted to understand what was Bill Gates's connection. Now, we know that Bill Gates is Mr. Vaccination, Mr. I want to vaccinate every human on the planet. But what's not promoted is that he's Mr. I own most or have huge shareholdings in most of the vaccination companies across the world. And what I also wanted to investigate was whether he was involved in any type of coronavirus research, which subsequently he was proven and found that he has been involved in it for a long, long time. And he's also been involved in funding research institutes like the Purbright Institute in the UK, funding them through the foundation to develop vaccines, but not only vaccines for coronaviruses, but also the coronaviruses themselves, which is a big red flag, as you would imagine. Back to Tony Fauci, who's this guy? Okay, he's the national director of the NIH, National Institute of Health in the US, but also the diseases area, infectious diseases area. He works parallel to the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. He sits in a position of funding authority. He works closely with the bioweapon laboratory in Fort Detrick in North Carolina. And then, of course, the Wuhan scientist, she appears on the scene, and I'm not going to even try and pronounce her name because I bugger it up each time. But he started working with her. And Dr. Judy Mikovits, who had been working there the decade before and then fell out of favour with Dr. Tony Fauci, she blew the lid on the bioweapon program that was being developed there and how to develop the evolution of a virus so that it would be able to transmit into human bodies. And so she blew the lid on that. And I looked at that closely and discovered that, of course, we all knew that the Wuhan virus as Trump so gleefully was calling it the Chinese virus. You've got to hand it to him for not bothering with being PC. And but he certainly raised the flag that, okay, Wuhan is where the release happened, but what was the train that got it to that point? And the train started off at Fort Detrick in North Carolina, under the auspices of Fauci and his crew. He then funded the Wuhan lab, $3.7 million US of the US taxpayers' money. The scientist goes back to Wuhan with the virus. Next minute, we know it's released on humanity, and we now know where that's gone.
And we should I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, because if anybody, this is the first time they've heard of this story, this is all documented.
All of it.
This is all easily defined. It's not a conspiracy. It's actually documented. I shared something the other day from a Forbes article that said 54 scientists that are associated with the National Institute of Health, or the NIH, have been either suspended or fired because of their collusion or their relationship with external entities, so to speak.
Yeah, no, you're right. So one thing that's really important to us, and Pete, I'm glad you've mentioned that, because one thing I always say in my briefings and my broadcasts is be calm, be credible, be factual, and stay on a solid footing. Because if you can do that and you provide references and sources, and if you've got that all ready to go when you are questioned, nobody can say it's conjecture or conspiracy. And that's very, very important, because, you know, these guys that perpetrate these types of things, they rely on public ignorance. And because of public ignorance, the public don't resist. So they take non-resistance as a mandate. So that's how they operate. Keep the population uninformed, and the silence is the mandate. So that's how they do it. But none of this is conjecture. So after identifying the train from the US to Wuhan and that release, I then wanted to try and connect to the narrators of the story. So starting with Dr. Neil Ferguson, who's now infamous beyond all recognition from the Imperial College in London in the UK, who is a well-known the sky is falling kind of guy. You know, he's the boy or the man that cried wolf, where, you know, he's done this before, but what he did this time, saying that if the global population and governments didn't combine into one unit and take a unit approach to confronting COVID, then there'd be hundreds of millions of deaths, you know, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of deaths, you know, just absolutely, you know, uncontrollable, out of this planet bad.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about Neil Ferguson there, because I was interviewed by Liz Hayes on 60 Minutes 2 weeks, or it was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago that we actually did the interview, and it went out in New Zealand last Sunday, a week ago, and in Australia 2 Sundays ago. And in that, I actually filmed the whole interview myself. So it was a 90-minute interview. I was allowed to film that. And one of the questions that Liz asked me was, why is Bill Gates, why do you think this is all happening? And I said, well, why don't you look at the Imperial College of London and look at this man, Ferguson, and just the look on her face was,
really,
there was nothing there. Like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, it's common knowledge. This is like it can't be any more blatantly obvious that this gentleman, and we'll use that word, over the last decade or two has created computer models of different viruses that have gone out into the world. And it has been proven each and every time that he has, or his team have suggested what will happen, hasn't happened. And it's been off by...
off the scale.
Off the scale. And this is the person that has basically instigated this whole lockdown globally. If that's my interpretation of it.
No, you did right. No, that's absolutely right. But and the story that goes with that is that, so there's a correlation again, Imperial College back to Gates, back to Fauci, then the WHO. So they're all connected, you know, and our own Director General of Health here, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, who's been very much the guy that's this unelected man that's deciding on the future of businesses that have collapsed and lives ended. He's also ex-WHO. So when you start to do all the web pinning and connections, what emerges is a very suspicious, what I call chain of players and actors that are connected to each other. And that question is to why Bill Gates? Well, just look at it, you know, in a sensibly. Number one, it makes great commercial sense to Bill Gates to get into the vaccine industry. He says for every dollar he invests, he gets $20 back for it. You know, he's been in interviews, I don't know if you've seen them, but he says it blatantly. He goes, no, the vaccine industry is a fantastically profitable business. For every dollar I invest, I get 20 back from it. So That's the commercial basis.
I want to interrupt just for 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's something that I post a lot of stuff on social media, and a lot of people go, well, we can go out and get why are they giving it away for free? Like the flu vaccine. And I'm like,
it's not free.
And I'm like, what do you mean that it's free? I said, are the pharmaceutical companies giving it away? Or is it subsidized through the government, which the taxpayers then have to pay?
That's right.
I mean, I'd love for you to explain that just briefly and then get back onto the story, because somebody needs to tell the truth here.
No, you're onto it, Peter. You're onto it, mate. So no, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So so what they have age group categories for a start, where if you want the flu vaccine, you can go and get it, and it's free. And we're talking, massive amounts of the community being able to go and get their flu jabs, right? And there's no such thing as free anything from a pharmaceutical company. They are being paid for every unit of vaccine and vaccination that goes out there. They are being paid for every part of it. The administrator of that vaccine, the doctor, is getting paid for it. There is no such thing as a free lunch, as it were. And we've even had, I'll tell you something really suspicious too. I know an older gentleman who's refused his last 2 invitations for flu jabs, and yet when he got his yearly health report, he had down on the paperwork that he had those 2 flu jabs that he declined. So why is that? Because the surgery that was looking after him, the GP surgery that was looking after him, would have got paid for that. So even though he declined it, is on the paperwork that he received it. So there is a strong, sensible, clear commercial basis for this.
Mm-hmm. So, but we're paying. The taxpayers are paying.
The taxpayer pays, mate. That's the other thing. When people say the government is paying for it, that they're funding it, no, we, the taxpayer, are funding it. Government doesn't have any money. It's public money that they have. It's not their money. It's public money. Your tax, Peter, goes to your state and into the coffers. My money goes into a central account.
So we've shut down New Zealand. New Zealand was probably, and I've been watching New Zealand very closely because it was celebrated globally as the way to do things, and through the mainstream media. And I've been looking at it over this time, and I've seen different laws passed and different things. I'm like, and I'm going to use the word here, and it seems like there's a lot of fuckery going on. And not just in your country, but
it's everywhere. It's
globally. I don't want to use that word, but there's no other word that really sums it up except for fuckery, and because it just doesn't make sense. Even in Australia yesterday, the Victorian Premier has restricted, made a new statement yesterday and enforced new laws, or maybe not laws is the right word, but new guidelines for people. So let's go back to Fauci, Gates, and then how does it spread out to your country?
To New Zealand.
To your country, because you are New Zealand. Everybody is celebrating your Prime Minister at the moment. Well, I won't say everybody, but it seems that for anyone even to question your Prime Minister, you are labelled. I won't even use the. You're
marginalised. You're marginalised. For a start. But that's why it's so important to stay credible and factual. Because if there's any chink in your armour that way, you're done.
Yeah. So let's talk facts. New Zealand.
Yeah. Okay. So just covering off the links. So what we have all these people. I just want to go back to Gates just for 1 second before we move on past them. So his history is that his father set up Planned Parenthood in the United States, which really
means?
Planned Parenthood. Parenthood. It's very much the Planned Parenthood. They're the ones that administer, abortions and advise on how or whether you should have children and things like that. Planned Parenthood US. But when you examine Bill Gates' family history, they're they were highly into eugenics, which means controlling who's who in the herd, and whether they assess whether your DNA makeup, your physical makeup is going to be a contribution to the herd or a tax on the herd. Are you functional and contributory, or you're a drain? So that's exactly what Hitler did in Nazi Germany, because he considered that, of course, that the supreme race in Nazism eyes were blonde, blue-eyed Aryans, you know, and that anything less than that wasn't from a look and touch point of view wasn't up to standard. But what he did is that also he looked at people that with handicaps. He looked at ethnic groups such as Slavic people as being inferior genetically to Germans and Austrians, to the Aryan ideal. And what he did was he would experiment on them. Of course, he exterminated them, and because he considered them, obviously not viable to the herd, and not viable to take in the Third Reich further. But what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of his eugenics program originated out of the US. And so Bill Gates' family goes right back into that nest of people that were involved in that during the war. They all were involved, the Rockefellers, you name it. And again, it's all documented. None of this is conjecture. It's actually somewhat proud history for some of these guys, because we've got to remember they don't consider anything that they've done to be morally reprehensible. But we've always got to remember that they themselves aren't hiding anything because they don't believe they have anything to hide. For them, it's about helping humanity evolve to be its perfect self. So if you don't meet that criteria of the perfect human, sorry, mate, we're gonna vaccinate you and slowly exterminate your part of the human race. And that's eugenics. That's eugenics 101. So when you get into these things like eugenics and Bill Gates, I'll give you an example. So about 8 years ago, the World Health Organization, through the careful work of some investigative reporters from Europe, they went into Africa to investigate the claim that that one of the Bill and Melinda Gates programs of vaccination for African women was sterilizing them, that some of the African doctors themselves had raised the flag around, hey, there's something really, really terrible happening here. Now, the WHO, who validated the program into Africa, at first said, no, it's okay, there's nothing to be seen here. But what happened was, these investigative reporters went in there and they absolutely blew the lid on it, to the point that the WHO had to make a formal declaration saying that they were mistaken. There were issues with the vaccine that Gates had rolled out, and that they'd stopped it, and that it was a lesson learned. Let's move on and let's all forget about it. But the problem with that is that there were hundreds of thousands of African women that were sterilized, and apparently there were men as well involved in it. There was a male version of it, so it not only got into the ovary and egg system of females, but it got into the sperm of men as well, which had a component in it which sterilized the sperm and the eggs at once. So this is all documented again. The WHO, to their credit at the time, they did come out and say, look, there is a problem here. We shouldn't have approved it. We've learned our lesson. Let's move on. So the whole eugenics aspect of where Bill Gates is coming from, he doesn't hide it. He speaks about it all the time. I mean, there's that famous speech where he says to an audience that, he said, look, if we do our job real well, we can, he says, reduce the population by 10 to 15%, the population numbers that are being projected to come down the line. And so you can only do that through sterilization. That's not prevention or getting pregnant. That's sterilization. So these guys end up putting their foot in it, just like Tony Fauci did in 2017, when he's at a very big White House type function, where he says, that this administration could expect a surprise viral epidemic during the course of its administration period. So that, again, it's not conjecture. It's all there for people to see. Just do your homework, and that's the thing with people, and it's something that we should say as broadcasters always to people: don't take our word for it. Please research what we say. Research it, and as you say, mate, it's not even hidden. It's hidden in plain sight, in fact, isn't it?
So let's get into New Zealand. So you guys over there have probably the best track record with this virus.
Sure.
Well, there's other countries that have a better track record, I think, but we don't hear about them.
Sure. Okay. So that's a really good one, and brings me back to that Sunday afternoon where I was thinking about this, had studied it, combined all my research, and I did this broadcast. Now, I had a couple of thousand people on my Facebook friendship list, and I thought I'll broadcast this and maybe get 1,000 of those tuning in at some point. Within a couple of days, just a few days, 50,000 had gone into it. Thousands had tuned in on the day. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. It was unprecedented. Then I got demands for more information. And I just kept on spitting out these broadcasts about what I felt was going on, definitely from a geopolitical, from an observational point of view, from a legal, statute and government, democracy challenge point of view, and also from a biblical point of view. I did a couple of Bible studies online, and it just blew up, Peter. To the point where I started getting people from all sorts of backgrounds, all types of economic status, religio status, race, doesn't matter. Everyone you could think of was reaching out to me. I'm a marketer somewhat due to my early training, and I sat there one day and thought to myself, you think in segments when you're a marketer, don't you? Who am I speaking to? Who do I need to speak to? And I couldn't do it with this crowd of people that I've been talking to. They didn't fit. They didn't fit into any one type of segment.
That's really interesting. And sorry to interject there.
Yeah, no.
Same thing happened with 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago when I appeared. I without a word of a lie, I must have had 10,000 messages.
Yeah.
And I was looking like yourself. I was like, what is this demographic? And I have the Christians, I had Jewish people, I had Muslims, I had Indigenous, I had atheists, I had the Intergalactic Star Federation people
I've had
with the unicorns and whatever. I had such a broad spectrum, people wanting sovereignty and that had been campaigning for this. It was like all of a sudden, instead of my normal demographic, which was, I think I've said it before, an older group of females, all of a sudden it was like, boom.
Everyone.
I was like, whoa, this is really fascinating. I've never seen this. And it was overwhelming to be perfectly honest with you, because it was, this is powerful.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit shocked by that. And so tell me, because it seems like you've got the same thing here, but you've actually got a position of the political path is not for me. That's at this point in time. But for you, so what did that do for you?
Yeah, so I can. It's neat to hear you say that, because you know what I'm going through. Every morning, just thousands of messages that I can't answer. Requests to talk, requests to go to meetings and all that. And it is completely overwhelming, and you can't plan it. And I think what happened with me is that I was getting huge calls to stand up and fight for the people. That's really was that. Number one, that someone who already had a small profile as a musician, finally someone was standing up and saying these things that needed to be said, to call the narrative out, what was wrong with it, but with that came this, in the words of Uncle Ben and Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, because I was getting these messages, Pete, that were full of fear, anxiety, bewilderment. You know what they look like. I know you do. Questioning, wanting answers, where to, how, am I in danger, all these things. And I couldn't ignore them. Each one of those messages took my heart apart. And along with those messages came more and more to stand as a person at the head of a movement, to get into government, to fix this thing up, to actually start protecting our rights. And I'll go into that in a second. So that's how that's happened. So we've had 530,000 people over the last few weeks peer into my life and into what I'm saying and things like that. And that
can we 530,000 people in a country of how many?
about 4.8, I think we are, 4.8 million.
So that's over 10%.
Yeah. It's massive. It's massive. One of my posts did 170,000 in a matter of hours the other day. I did on Facebook. 172,000, 4,000 shares, 2,000 comments, messages, and don't forget the PMs to go with it. It's.
Can I ask you a question before you keep going with your
Yeah.
story then?
Sure.
Do you have any doubt in you right now that you are on the wrong path?
No, I don't. I questioned it at first. I did, because Christians and politics don't normally go together. Not with my type of biblical faith. And I really questioned it. I was very reluctant. I always tell people when I have these meetings that we're having, and they're big, packed, jam meetings, that I'm the most reluctant politician they'll ever meet, because I didn't want it, didn't ask for it. But now I'm in it. I'm in it for real, and I'm in it to win it, to protect our people.
So, but that's as somebody that would question you, what have you got to gain from this, Billy?
Nothing. I'm quite happy with my life as it is. I've got a little business that keeps my family and I very well looked after, which we're very blessed. We have a beautiful home. I've got a beautiful family that I don't like to be away from. I'm away from them every week now, and so really nothing. The earnings of a politician I already get plus a year. There's no gain for me at all. All I do is replace my comfortable life with my darlings at my home for one in Wellington, which is cold and wet.
You got
for
seven.
No gain.
And you got 7 children downstairs right now.
Right now, I've got 7 of them. They've just quietened down now. So I reckon that's a really awesome question, Peter, because I talk about that in my broadcasts and at my meetings. You know, there is nothing to gain for me in this, and all I want to see, the gain for me, is that we fix things up and we protect this country, our sovereignty as a nation, and that we restore democracy, because democracy is no longer functional anymore in this government. It's over. It's finished, and we'll go into that in a second. We have economic destruction, which we're dealing with, and we have a government that doesn't have the skill set and experience or the will, in my view, to see this fixed in the right way. We've got environmental destruction, so those very things that you and I talk about that we love about our country, hunting, fishing, gathering in the bush, and that's going to be gone. Medical health, sovereignty and independence and freedom for the individual, so that no government has the authority to bring in any type of mandatory vaccination of any kind and enforce that upon the unwilling body of a citizen of New Zealand. So, these things are extremely important to fight for, because once they're gone, they're gone. It's very hard to capture the horse again once she's bolted halfway around the raceway track. Very hard to do that. So, your question about, what is there to gain? That's what we gain. That's the only gain, and that's worth fighting for.
So you've got all of these followers over the last, or supporters for your movement. Let's talk about what did you decide to create, and what is your intention now? What is the name of your movement or party?
Yeah, thank you. I like to call it a movement because it really truly is. It's called the New Zealand Public Party. Why did we call it that? Because it's the public's party. It's not my party. It's all of our party. It's everyone's party. You see the difference with this, Peter, and I say this a lot. This wasn't birthed out of sitting around with an ideology that we dreamt up to try and get ourselves into a job in Parliament. This is just a response to all the stuff that the public were concerned about. No one was talking about it. I exposed it, and then everyone's come out across New Zealand, and it's growing by the minute, of people coming on board and saying, look, we're behind you. We're worried about the same things. Please fix it up. So it really is a movement. It was a response to the calls and demands of people, to me personally, to lead the fight. But the name is really important because it's about New Zealand. It's about the public. Unfortunately, it's not a fun party, but it is a party that is involved in the political arena, and it's designed for one thing only, and that is to represent the public in Parliament with enough seats in the House to keep any major party, if we are not the major party, any major party honest, because there is no accountability mechanism in the House of Representatives in our Parliament system right now that is honest, has integrity, transparency, and that is willing to call a spade a spade. And I take that as a very, very, very serious problem and issue with our system as it is. What we've seen in the last few weeks, since I became really seriously concerned about what was happening here, if you sort of sit back and you examine the landscape and also the evidence of the chain of players and actors, you'll see that our Prime Minister, she sits right in the heart of the chain of players and actors. She really, really does. She's connected to the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation. She's well connected to Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations. She's obviously, 2009, she was the president-elect of the International Youth Socialist Organization, schooled with all the parliamentarians of the Global Initiative, basically, from Tony Blair to Helen Clark, you name it. She's gone right through the training and induction program to where she is today. And she has one goal and one goal only, and that's to see New Zealand 100% signed up and entrenched and implemented in the Agenda 30, the UN Agenda 30 program, which to all your viewers who don't know that, please go and look at that, because Australia is equally as threatened and ensconced in it. United Nations Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 are globalist programs to bring in an absolute totalitarian socialist system that has fascism as well in it, to control every aspect of what we eat, what we grow, our medical life and health, our financial health and independence as a country and as individuals, our legal status, what we build, what we do with our land, where we live. This plan that they've got in these agendas, the public need to read these agendas, but you've got to be smart about how you do it, because they use really neat language buzzwords like, sustainability. Well, you and I guess, probably very similar. For me, sustainability is not pouring my garbage on the side of the road or my petrol into the stream and looking after our land. Sensible stuff. I'm a hippie at heart. I really am. Mum, dad are. And so, keeping our soil clean and healthy and all that's and our water clean and without stuff in it, that's without question, right? But when they talk about sustainability, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about control. You might as well get a black pen and cross out sustainability and put control in it, because that's what it goes into. But they talk about things like social justice, social equity. These are all buzzwords for putting everyone in together, homogenizing everybody, putting everyone down into the same level, and that we all become the proletariat, which is the socialist buzzword for the herd. And that's exactly what this does, where they control everything. They regulate human life through a technocratic system, which of course the 5G plan is a part of. And they regulate everything so that you can't do anything unless it's mandated, approved, permitted, and within purview of the state's approval. And those are very, very, very serious problems. And when I say state, it's not the Australian state, it's not the New Zealand state, it's the UN state. And that's what happens, because it redefines your sovereign integrity as a nation and hands it over to the United Nations. And what we have in New Zealand, Peter, you may have heard of the Treaty of Waitangi, and that actually is a very good document at this point, because that founding document that we have here is our deal as tangata whenua, as Māori, and I would include all Kiwis in this, is our deal with the Crown. And the Crown is not the United Nations. So and so what we have now is that Jacinda Ardern is now starting to amend the New Zealand Bill of Rights, which is a deep concern, because it's that New Zealand Bill of Rights that keeps governments from overreaching. And right now she's starting to tinker with that. So when you break down the behaviour, and I always say to people, never listen to a politician's words, examine the behaviour. Just examine the behaviour. Don't care a toss about what a politician says. Examine the behaviour, because that betrays the intent. And when you examine everything about how Jacinda Ardern has handled this crisis, which is based on now proven faulty information from the experts that said that it was that the virus had a lethality of 3 to 6%. Now we know it's 0.1 less, 0.1% of lethal, which is the same, if not less, than a strong influenza virus. And you've got wonderful scientists around the world. Like one of my heroes is Dr. John Ioannidis from Stanford University. Do you know him, Pete? You seem like you do.
No, I don't, but I'm getting excited now.
Oh, he's awesome. He's from Stanford University. He's a Greek American. He's a wonderful, calm man. One of the world's leading scientists on epidemiology and population health. And him and his team have come out and blown it all up and said there's no way for any of this, no reason for it. It's like using a sledgehammer to kill a cricket. The response to it was unjustified. But at the same time, here in New Zealand, we had our own group of leading university professors that are epidemiologists and scientists around population health and viral diseases. Professors like Dr. Simon Thornley, who was a fantastic New Zealand scientist, came out probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, just after I did my first broadcast, and said, we were at lockdown, I think 3 or 4 by then. He said there's no reason for us to be in this lockdown. He said that he and all his colleagues agree that there was no longer any substantiation for New Zealand to be in this crisis lockdown that was destroying our economy. There was no reason for it, no rhyme for it, and certainly no scientific basis for it. So what happened overnight, he and all his colleagues are now marginalised and gagged, and not given any time to speak at all. And that's come out, and they are being called the Plan B science team. Can you believe that? How condescending is that? So going back to our government, Peter, and its reaction, you start to get very, very, very suspicious when you see Jacinda's connections and Dr. Bloomfield's connections to all these people that have been spinning this false narrative. Again, factually assessing the narrative and the basis from a science and medical point of view, we've assessed it. The cat's out of the bag. It never was there. It never was there to the level that Dr. Neil Ferguson and the WHO and Bill Gates has been saying, and Fauci. It's never been there. It's proven now. The second point is, watching Jacinda's personal relationships come into play in her decision making around the country and how it's going. And there's an old thing that I believe in greatly, that two key statements. One is birds of a feather flock together. That's one you never forget. And over here you can say, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. And that's what you got to do with this stuff, because some of it, as you know, Peter, it's so blatant. You think to yourself, nah, this can't be, And so what we start to do, though, we see the connection between very suspect role players in this whole narrative, and that's now we see the mechanisms that need to come into place to see this global initiative called Agenda 30 to be rolled out globally. And that's why this is a global scandemic, and that's why you're seeing everybody reading off the same sheet. In fact, when you see media people in the UK, in the Middle East, India, New Zealand, Australia, they're all reading the same words verbatim in their news reports. They've got a script, that's what they read, and that's how they go. And the politicians are very much the same way as well. So
what I'd love to know, Billy, is what's next? I mean, and for you as an individual, have you got a team? Does it need a team? What
it does.
Because looking at the logical steps or chronological steps for you to have an influence for your fellow countrymen and women, what happens? And then I want to get back into the treaty and the Maori values, and we'll go there later. But what are the next steps?
Okay, so right now we have, this. Bearing in mind that this party is a week old, So number one is we've got an incredible team. I mean, it's like I call them the Avengers, the political Avengers. They are really super sharp people behind me. They are incredibly smart. They're brilliant at what they do. They've come in behind me, and we're now setting things up big time to really take this political party or public movement into being a force to reckon with from the parliamentary point of view. And what I mean by that is we have this team that's coordinating with teams all across New Zealand. So the public have mobilised themselves into setting up working groups in towns and cities across New Zealand right now. Right now, I've got worker bees, my fellow worker bees, that are building the hives in each of the areas for me to come along and speak from platforms. So right now, we've got teams of people that are getting people signed on to our party. A bit of context here for you, Peter, is that normally when in New Zealand, by the Electoral Commission rules, you've got to have 550 registered financial members or registered members of your party. Normally, it would take new political parties maybe months to get that 550 people, months, if not. I know some political parties that are coming over to amalgamate into us that have been trying now for quite a while to get their 550 members. We did it in 2 days. In 1 week, we have 1,500 sign-ons.
Wow.
In the next couple of days, that'll be 2,000, and it's just over a week. So that gives you an idea of the momentum that's behind this movement. I can't control that. It's not me. That's the public. And in fact, I've had 2 members of the public really switched on. People say to me, Billy, just keep what you're doing. We will do the pushing. We'll push you in there to fight for us. And that I can't tell you how warm that makes my heart, because I'm so tired and focused on the fight, really, and getting the message out there. From here, and what we want to do is we actually want to try and get some of the other parties to join us so that we aggregate the minor party vote and steal more of the major party vote. And the reason for that is that a lot of the little parties, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but the minor parties are very, very narrow in their appeal because of their policies that they stand on. We're a broad-based movement because it's the people's issues, the same issues that I have, don't get me wrong, but it's all of our stuff, and these are the things that are important, and they're not niche, they're broad, they're everyone's interests. And so, but what you have a lot of these minor parties, they take one little part of it, and that's them, and that's never gonna unfortunately add up to be much. And I spent a lot of time analysing the tracking history of how these parties doing the votes and the elections and stuff, and it's always very, very, very low. So I'm inviting them as subject matter experts in their own areas to come in to join underneath the New Zealand Public Party banner and take a broad approach. Like you, Pete, when I broadcast something, within hours it's had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of shares and views, likes and all that sort of thing. And so what it is, it's good to, when you have a momentum like that, to try and bring everybody in to increase the solidarity as well of the movement. But the goal would be to get into the elections and to get at least 15 to 20% of the vote. Then we'll have a number of MPs that we can take into the House with us, real subject matter experts that we're working with now. We're canvassing and recruiting, and really keep the government. You see, the issue is this, Pete, is that there's no point in us just going in with 5%, which is the threshold to get in, which is 130,000 people voting for you. I think we'll smash that. I really do. But our intent is to go way beyond that, because we need to get in there and not work with an inherited system. We actually need to start looking at the constitutional risks to the public and to New Zealanders and fixing them, because that's how, I mean, at the moment, New Zealand has endured over the last few weeks, we've endured the introduction of the COVID-19 health response bill, which gives police and now military right under the quarantine aspect of this law to go into Peter's home and take Peter and his daughter and his wife without warrant and go and force a medical procedure on you. And the way that they introduced that bill, they kept it secret right up until the last minute so that opposition MPs couldn't read the document. Then on Friday day, they lay it down on the table, and everyone had only hours to read it before it was first read in the House. The next thing they introduce is the internet censoring or internet filtering bill by New Zealand First Party. Introduced that through a minister called Tracy Martin. She introduced this bill again without the necessarily public promotion of it. And what that does is, if they don't like what Peter says or what Billy says in our posts or digitally, you get 3 warnings. First warning is take it down. You don't. Second warning is take it down and they'll narrow your broadcast reach. And the third warning is you're in real trouble. And if you're a business, posting these things that they define as objectionable, you face up to $200,000 fine. Now there's another 15 bills they're trying to rush through as well, which I don't know enough about yet to fully comment on. But the joke of it is it's 15 bills in 17 hours. But the one that has me desperately concerned is that they are wanting to amend the New Zealand Bill of Rights, and that's, you just don't touch that document. You don't touch that bill, because it is the New Zealand Bill of Rights, which is part of the common law system that all former Commonwealth countries are based on, and certainly parliamentary systems that follow the Westminster setup, if you like. That's what we're dealing with.
Wow. I've got to ask you, skeletons in your closet, because they're going to come for you. Anything you need to put out there into the world and be open and honest about? Yeah.
Look. It's I've been doing that since day one. If you look at my first broadcast, it's the first thing I did is go, here it is, this is me. And people make a joke of it. They say, what are you talking about? They're not skeletons. To me, they are, because they're my things that I don't like. And you got to be pragmatic and honest and transparent. So number one is, before I was a really committed Christian it must be about 6-7 years ago now, I got horribly drunk at a work do after work with all the mates, and everyone was telling blue jokes, right? Which horrifies me, And I said probably the most weakest to be amongst the crew. I said told a naughty joke, and only one person got told on the next day at work, and that was me. So nothing happened to me. I didn't get fired or anything. I just got, you're a naughty boy, Billy. And I said, what about the other 10 people who were telling? Oh well, that's right. We're talking about you here today. So that's number one. And probably the other thing which really isn't a skeleton, but it's better to raise these things, is that I joined the police in 2003 after serving in the army, and before that I used to co-run a community policing centre. So again, community policing, and after getting down to police college, I discovered that I'd been recruited wrong. And what I mean by that is I told a couple of recruiting officers that when I was about 16, I got caught with a little roach of marijuana with me. I didn't get convicted or anything like that. I told them, and they said that was no big deal. When I got down there, I actually felt it was a big deal. So I went and spoke to an inspector and said, hey, I just want to let you know that this is what happened. He totally said, just go away. That's just absolutely nothing. And then I got called in by another person that wanted to talk about it, and I told them exactly what happened. And then it was like, oh, look, this is so nothing. Then a third person wanted to talk to me about it. And they said, who were the officers that told you, that informed you that this was a nothing? And I said, well, it was such and such and such and such. And the look on their face, you talk about look on the face, the look on the face that one of these ladies had was like, in reflection, I know what it is now. She knew exactly who the person was that I was talking about it. So anyway, they put me into in an investigative cycle for about a month, and that, which really didn't worry me at the time. And then they put the thumb screws on, talking about your integrity and all that. And that was really the line when integrity is so important to me. And and you don't let institutions define your integrity for you. That's done internally, and that's my background. And so I spoke to the superintendent, and he said, mate, you just don't go anywhere. You just stay right where you are. You have a wonderful career ahead of you in the police. Just stick with it. And they gave me crap for another week, and I just said, here's my resignation. You can have it. And so I resigned from police, and then about a month later, I got rung up by one of the inspectors, asked me if I'd rejoin. I said, no thanks, no thank you, mate. I've kicked off my music career again. So that's it. Other than that, I've been the rock and roller. I've toured with Jimmy Barnes on guitar. I've played guitar and with Ian Moss in Australia, and toured the world and been a rock and roller, mate. It's when you are a rock and roller, you're a rock and roller. You drink too much and you do all those things that you shouldn't do, but they're long behind me. So I think I've had a pretty much done everything what most people have done in life. But that's it for me. I don't. This week I've been asked. It's been claimed that I've been a Scientologist, an agent of the UN. I'm a secret agent for the government. I'm a Mormon. I'm a Freemason. There was another one that's come out. I've forgotten. So people are definitely looking for skeletons of a type that they can bring out. This guy this morning that emailed me about my military career, saying basically implying I've never been in the army or anything like that. That's they do come for you, but I really don't care about that. It's the public. I'm here to serve. People can chuck anything they like at me. If it's untrue, that's when my nostrils flare at me. If someone says they saw me drunk at a gig 10 years ago, I'm not going to argue with that because it was probably true.
Mm.
You know.
I'd love to finish off with, my wife and I were invited to sit with some elders, Indigenous elders in Australia the other day, and
wonderful.
Hear about the history, the true history, in not the stuff that I was taught as a kid in schools, talking about the education when we started here. And over the years that I've been with my wife, she's always talked about how beautiful her upbringing was in Christchurch, and she was in a what she would call a pretty tough neighborhood. And but what she always has said was just the power of the Maori and the way that it has been incorporated into the culture, how it hasn't been ignored, and actually you learn the two languages as you're a kid, as you're growing up, and there's a great respect and a cultural respect between the original owners of the land. And the treaty that you mentioned before and the power of the Maori and who are you and what you represent is, I would love to finish this off with what you hope to achieve from the last couple of 100 years for everybody in New Zealand, for the Maori, for all the inhabitants that are there now, and why this is so important for you and for the people of New Zealand, this next step. And
is that all?
That's it. That's it. And I'm nearly out of battery on my computer, so it's going to have to be.
All right. I'll do it as quickly as I can. That's a wonderful and mighty question. I think number one, I think the treaty really is everyone's document. It was always politicised far more than it should have been. It's been exploited on both sides of the cultural divide, both on the Māori side and the Pākehā and European side. And I think I really do believe that tangata whenua Māori, as Indigenous people here, have a wonderful and foundational heritage here that underpins and should underpin our great nation here. It's something that is a culture that everyone can embrace. Look at our haka with the All Blacks, and everyone does a haka now. And it's something that we can access as all Kiwis can. I think the treaty document needs to be sat down and worked through about how we can best implement it, so it's not a token gesture on the side of government, and that there's real teeth given to it. But I also think there needs to be a real broad discussion with the Māori population in general, and not just the leaders, to find out how it can be best implemented to serve the people. But on a wider basis, I believe that all New Zealanders should be recognise that this document is their document, especially now, because what this government's trying to do is to sign New Zealand up into a foreign international agreement, which will take our sovereignty off us, and that requires us to then become a vassal of the United Nations. That's again, it's not conjecture. That's fact. But to do that, they need to get rid of the treaty. Because why? Because the treaty is our foundational document and agreement with the Crown. United Nations is not the Crown. The Crown is the Crown. And so it would behove all New Zealanders to adopt the beauty of the treaty as that protection and that foundation. Because, Articles 1 and 2 is about our relationship with the Crown. The third one is about how this rolls out as carers and first people of the land, and what we do with our forestry, our waters, our lakes and mountains and things like that. But unfortunately, these very laws that Jacinda and this government are wanting to sign us up completely destroy all of that. It will prohibit our inherent cultural practices, such as using native plant and fauna to heal ourselves, as just like old granny used to do with her different plants and things like that. They can make that illegal in the new Agenda 30 world, and that's not right. What I want to see is in New Zealand that because New Zealand has a huge heart, there's no question of that, And what we need to do is make sure that that heart is represented in the heart of the government, and that this country becomes a place where all people who have goodwill towards our country feel welcome, loved, and a part of the scenery. That's so important to me, because if we can get our relationship with the Indigenous tangata whenua and the treaty right, that opens up everything for everyone. And I'm a big believer that we can all do that, regardless of race, religion, and creed, and all those things. And that, to me, is only going to be achieved by making sure that we live in a truly democratic society, that our national sovereignty is protected for the people that live in our fair land. Without that, we're at risk. We will live under a tyrannical system, which this government has become and is wanting to further entrench into the lives of everyday Kiwis. And if we don't stand up now and fight for that, we're going to lose it forever. So my big dream is that New Zealand becomes the free society that I grew up with, and stays that way, and is protected for all people who love this country and want to call themselves Kiwis and New Zealanders.
Beautiful, my brother. Where can people find you and support you?
Thank you, bro. Thank you. I almost forgot to say that, didn't I? Okay. So our website is www.nzpp.org.nz. I'll say that again. That's www.nzpp.org.nz. I said that on a broadcast the other day and I got it wrong.
Billy, mate, I love you.
Love you too, brother. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the time and for sharing your wisdom today. I wish you and your movement the very best, and whatever I can do to support you. I have a feeling that if you're successful, which I believe you will be over there,
thank you.
Some of my friends will be asking you how you did it, and we'll see what we can do here in this country.
Thank you, brother. And next time I'm in Melbourne, when I'm not wearing politicians' clothes and I'm doing a gig, I'm hoping you'll come and join me. I'd love to have a cuppa with you in person.
I would love that. I would love to go fishing with you and cook you a meal, my friend.
I love that. It'd be a pleasure and an honour.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, bro.